what I try to bring you with my videos are a lot of the flies that I personally like to use, but also flies that are really accessible no matter what your fly tying experience level. I'm trying to bring the minimum amount of materials, but also a minimum amount of fuss, which gets you onto the water, but also, you know, the patterns don't look too complicated or overwhelming. I'm just trying to get you to give them a go, and yeah, well, both from the tying perspective and from the fishing perspective. The one I'm going to tie for you now is no different from that perspective. It's going to be a CDC and Elk, and as the name would indicate, you know, those are the two materials. Beyond the hook and the thread, you literally have a CDC plume and some elk in the wing. It's a great sedge pattern. You can tie it in a myriad of different colours. I'm going to tie a more natural one for you now, kind of a grey tan type colour, but you can actually do them in black, you know, cinnamon sedge, great red sedge, different size hooks, different colours, and essentially you cover a whole spectrum of different sedges. In the vise, a lot of the time I'm fishing, you know, a lot of my trout flies, size 14, size 16, tend to be the two very much go-to sizes in terms of trout flies. I've got a partridge fine dry SLD, size 14 in the vise here. You can use a size, an SLD2 as well if you wanted to. Again, I'm quite happy just with the standard SLD. Especially the size of the fish I catch. If you do better than me and catch every fish is a big one, then perhaps go for the SLD too. But the SLD is fine for what I catch. So size 14, I've got a Vivus 14O in olive, and I'm going to start in tying just shy of the head section. Just take a few turns just to secure it, snip off the excess, and then we bring in a CDC plume. So depending on the size of the hook you're using, again you can vary the size of the fly, so different sedges are different sizes obviously, but as a result as well vary the size of the CDC. For a medium size hook, such as a 14 or a 16, use a medium size CDC feather. If you're using a big hook, bigger hook like a 10, 12, then step up to a big CDC feather, and you know, again, if you're dropping down to maybe an 18 or something, just go on a smaller CDC feather. There is a reason for this. It's more about the length of the feather and how you will see when you wrap the CDC around the body. So the CD actually forms the body, and also then when you get up to around the front third, some of these loose fibers then become like a hackling, or like a hackling effect towards the thorax, and if you were to use too long a feather on too small a hook, essentially you don't get to that hackling stage. So there is a reason to choose a different size feather. So it's a very simple fly, but there's a couple of things that you need to get right. So with this, that's all I do is I draw my finger over and trap the tips of that CDC. I don't want to trap too many of these fine feathers, so I'm just tying in towards the tip and just securing those tip feathers, and just pinch a loop them in and take that down the body. Take it down just to where the bend starts, and then take your thread back up. So that's really secured it all in place there. Now you can at this stage just hold the feather and wrap. I actually prefer using a hackle plier right from the start, because you're going to need the hackle plier at the front end anyway, so actually I just prefer to use it right from the start. You get more control, and it saves the faff of having to introduce the hackle the hackle pliers at the end. Just work it up. As you're working it up, try not to twist the feather, the CDC feather, but also try not to trap those loose feathers as you're coming up. So you see now I'm about just over halfway, and some feathers are just starting to hackle up out of the CDC, and that's great. That's exactly what we want to happen at this stage. Keep it coming right up to the head, and it's going to be a fussy little pattern, as a sedge is in general. When you're up towards the head, tie it off, do a couple of turns just to hold the feather in place like so, and then double that stalk back and try and get a couple of turns over that stalk, and that means that's going absolutely nowhere. Clip off that hackle stalk. So at this stage, if you see a couple of fibers that are a bit too long, you can actually just pinch them back a little bit, or if there's just too many, again just pinch them a little bit. You can just get that to, yeah, just get it a bit sparser like so. But that's looking great. So the main wing is, I've got some Select Cow Elk, Nature Spirit, just great materials for your natural materials. One thing you do want at this stage is a hair stacker. I've got a little hair stacker here, I think it's a CNF one, but whatever. You got your hands on, little hair stacker, because you do actually want, you can, it's not showy, actually most of the time I don't bother using hair stackers, but actually on a fly like this, there's too many ends ending at too many intervals, so actually you need that hair stacker just to bring it into line. So I'm just going to take, so again it's got that that elk, and what we do after taking a decent pinch, hold the tips like so and just strip out any underfur, but also any fibers that are particularly short or broken off. We just strip all of that out. What you're then left with is a nice clump of elk like so, but as you can see they're just finishing at a load of different lengths, so we just need to tidy that up, and we tidy that up with the hair stacker. Just making sure I haven't got too much, there's a bit too much. So now is the time to get happy in terms of the amount of elk you're going to use. Again, that's going to vary according to the size of the hook. And then I'm just going to stack them all in that hair stacker like you'll see there. And then you just tap it a few times on your desk, and then that will align the tips. So I'm just going to try and pull this out to show you. The tips should now be nicely aligned. You can just see them there. So that's perfect. Now you can just come in, grab them, and then you've got a nice aligned clump of tips. So what we then do is we bring that up. So there's two ways of doing this now. A lot of people actually trim the, they measure it up, they switch fingers, and then they'll actually trim this off. Now I don't do that. I'll explain why. So I prefer to leave it all intact. So measure it up, and you want it just you want it protruding just beyond the bend of the hook, not more than that. Switch fingers, come back in and pinch a loop. So we're not spinning this, okay? Just do one loose wrap, two loose wraps, and then start pulling down. Just secure it, but don't let it spin, like so. So that's perfect. You can see that wing now. What that's going to give you is, you see it's all just stacking on top. There's nothing below, it's just stacking on top. I forgot to say as well, if you want to do a bit of a tail, you can use some like fluorescent wool, uni bright floss or something in the tail back here, if you want to do like an egg trailing egg sac or something, or just like a little strike point, that's fine. So the reason why again I haven't cut these already is now I actually have a lot more control and ease of getting towards the eye. So with these longer fibers I can now pick them back and get at that eye and get a much neater head to finish up on. Okay, so now I'm in that section. I can kick them back slightly, but also when I'm whip finishing, I've got all of those butt sections to hold on to give me a nice easy access and neat finish in that head. Tie it off, and that's done. Come in with the scissors to snip that thread off. So what we now do is just roll these together. So you've got all the budge in together, and you want to trim this. You do want these a little butt section protruding, like so. You can see them all finishing at the same point. Just stub your fingers across them, and then they splay out a little bit. The fly is that simple. That's a CDC and Elk. Really, really simple. 2 materials, but just a great sedge pattern. Really, really great sedge pattern. If you're doing this in a black version, black CDC, black wing, black fine deer hair or elk in the wing, what you can also do is in the thorax put a few knotted black pheasant tail legs, and that can actually work really well as a hawthorn pattern as well. So it can cover a few different things, but first and foremost it is a caddis or basically a sedge pattern. Again, if you're not happy with too many straggly ends, you can pinch them back a little bit, but honestly that fussiness is what you're looking for. But a great little pattern, very, very easy to tie. So make a few up, take them out, and I hope they bring you luck. Tight lines.